So my name is Holly Mepham, and since September last year, I've been working as a graduate heritage consultant at Royal Haskellonian DHV. And today I'm going to talk about how heritage consultancy can engage across disciplines and audiences. So a bit of background about my company. Royal Haskellonian DHV supports the delivery of multidisciplinary projects, varying from the development of offshore wind farms and battery storage sites to coastal schemes and developing sustainability strategies for ports. With such a range of project work, naturally my co-workers specialise in a range of disciplines, and I work alongside engineers, designers and consultants with varying specialisms. And so to visualise where archaeology and heritage sit within this, the heritage practice where I sit falls under the Environment Resilience Renewables team, and heritage consultants work alongside people in the ecology practice, ornithology practice, those who have specialisms in marine mammals, air quality, or acoustics. These are all disciplines that are assessed as part of the planning of developments that my company works on. So before I get into the detail of how heritage and archaeology is considered in the planning process, the need for multidisciplinary engagement, and actually answering the number one question that I get asked when talking about what it is I do, that I'm sure some of you may be wondering what actually is a heritage consultant. I'd like to take you back to April this year. So I was sat in the room full of colleagues from all corners of my company, from different teams, different jobs, different offices, and I was tasked with presenting an introduction to heritage and archaeology and how that fits into what it is I do. It was the second event for the graduate programme that I've been fortunate enough to be a part of, that my company runs, that delivers these graduates from all specialisms working together to enhance kind of key essential skills that are essential to those who are early in their career. It was also the classic not knowing anyone in the room scenario, the kind of situation where if you don't have the confidence in yourself, that sort of doubt on your ability creeps in. And I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel a little bit of imposter syndrome as I stood in the room. I still feel relatively new to archaeology. My BA is in history, and my master's in business and heritage management, where archaeological practice formed a third of my degree. So I didn't necessarily feel like I was the most qualified to be presenting archaeology and heritage and in planning. And I'm sure I won't be the only one in attendance here who, on revealing what it is that they do for work or what it is they study, that has been quizzed on like various events from history or prehistory, only to sort of answer that it wasn't something you were necessarily a specialist in. Anyway, however, it was the planning and delivery of this presentation that shifted how I see heritage consultancy and the work it is that I do. And I've narrowed this down into three sort of realizations that I want to share with you today to illustrate my job and how multidisciplinary engagement can positively impact projects, and the opportunity that is presented to consultants to better support, champion and achieve better outcomes for heritage and archaeology and the wider environment as a whole. So the first thing I realised is that it's easy to make assumptions about the knowledge that those who work outside of the heritage and archaeology sector have. Naturally, I knew that in my presentation back in April, I would need to define heritage consultancy. And when talking to people outside of the sector, from experience, I know this usually kind of listed the following preconceptions of what a heritage consultant actually is. Normally is that someone who works with old buildings? Is it someone who makes new discoveries, digging in the ground? Or is it someone who spends all their time in the library? In some respects, these general themes, these preconceptions aren't entirely inaccurate. My role was predominantly desk-based, with a focus on research for the production of reports, considering the significance and potential of heritage from the Paleolithic to modern periods. I'm involved with the production of written schemes investigation and the planning of trenching schemes. So though I don't participate in the fieldwork, I am involved in the planning of it. And assuming that the reference to old buildings corresponds to the conception of like listed buildings, these designated heritage assets are central to considering how heritage can be impacted by development, particularly in relation to potential changes to the setting of heritage assets. So if I were to give a dictionary-style definition of a heritage consultant, it would be an individual who partakes in the assessment of risks and offers advice on mitigation measures for heritage and archaeology, be it known or unknown, buried or above ground, that has the potential to be impacted or changed by a development. And this is in line with UK planning policy, specifically Environmental Impact Assessment, or EIA, which forms the planning requirements of most projects that I work on. So EIA, as detailed in the town and country planning regulations, is designed to ensure that all potential effects that a proposed projects may have on the environment is accounted for and presented within reports produced as part of the planning process. For heritage and archaeology, across the different stages of EIA, this will typically include the completion of desk-based assessments, which provide the baseline of the known and potential heritage within an appropriately defined study area for the size of the project. And for this, I obtain as much data as possible on the development, including designated heritage assets, so your scheduled monuments, listed buildings, registered parks and gardens that are all from historic England, as well as historic environment record data, which is specific to the area. And this assessment is typically completed in consultation with the county archaeologist for development. And especially for larger projects, including wind farms, mitigation required would include programs of intrusive and non-intrusive survey, including geophysical survey and trial trenching. So it's going back to what I mentioned before about being involved in some of the planning of fieldwork. But to return back to the presentation in April and the point about the assumption of prior knowledge, it was insightful to note that though my audience were familiar with the EIA and consultancy more broadly, many of my audience were not familiar with the nature of specific heritage considerations, including designations and different survey mitigations. So this, though the engagement did help to alleviate kind of the aforementioned imposter syndrome in terms of me feeling fairly knowledgeable in what it is that I do, it did lead me to the second realization that consultants being viewed as kind of the expert in the subject have the potential to limit stakeholder engagement with archaeology. I've highlighted in bold here on the screen that archaeology can play quite a big part in like whether planning permission can be granted for a project, and is a key aspect in kind of the decision-making process rather. And so as a result, it sort of could develop an us versus them scenario, and heritage being seen as something that could stop a development taking place, which isn't necessarily what you want. You want to be preserving and kind of including archaeology within projects. It shouldn't be something that can just be seen as something that limits. So this then led me to the third point that I'm bringing on to today, the multidisciplinary approach and communicative engagement. So this is something that my company is very hot on. Within projects that my company do, the multidisciplinary approach is something that is at the forefront of our work. We have Enhancing Society Together, which is the purpose of driving the project work that we do. And as part of this, we actively seek to collaborate with partners, stakeholders, and our clients in projects and initiatives together. And as a result, where possible from a heritage perspective, we strive to engage internally and externally with opportunities to enhance the historic environment. This could be in the form of developing places through projects that allow for kind of increased engagement with archaeology and heritage of an area. And I can't talk about some of the projects I'm currently working on. I would just like to highlight one of the projects that my company are currently in the process of completing, the Portsmouth and South Sea Coastal Scheme. This is the UK's largest local authority-led coastal defence project. And if you're familiar with Portsmouth, it's all along the front here, as shown on the screen. and it should reduce the risk of flooding for more than 10,000 homes and 700 businesses. And the multidisciplinary work that is going on here has allowed for a kind of embedded archaeological design. I'll show you some photos in a second, but my company have acted as the principal engineers working in collaboration with Wessex Archaeology, who've been participating in the practical archaeology side of the project, along with coastal partners who've been the client manager and LDA, the landscape architects. So this is what it's currently looking like. This stage of the scheme is completed, and during the watching brief, the demolition and construction of the new site, Wessex Archaeology encountered the defences of Southsea that were put up by Bernard de Gaume, that are mapped on the historic 1665 map, and the project has been able to naturally they've been preserved in situ, but incorporate it into the design of the scheme so the public can engage with the archaeology that's there better, and they've got a nice visualization on the board there. So finally, to conclude, the key points is that heritage can or does add to the value of an area and identity of a place and its community, and as a result, to shape designs and projects, heritage should be kind of communicated with everyone, be a collaborative kind of effort that can increase engagement, and as a result, bridge together the past and the present to enhance society. Thank you very much.